Everyone has dealt with some form of anxiety before. It's part of being alive. But anxiety can range from benign to debilitating, and it has a habit of popping up at the worst possible time. This is the first in a 4-part series on how we can better deal with anxiety. Right off the bat, I want to say that this is not a comprehensive guide by any means. These are just some perspectives and practices that worked for me and helped me understand and deal with my anxiety. So the first step in dealing with anxiety is to develop a better understanding of it, and develop a better understanding of how the mind works. And this can be done using something called the Dragon Rider principle. We often visualize the mind as one entity, just like we see one person when we look in the mirror.
It's what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
The mental what?
The mental projection of your digital self.
Yeah, sure. Like that, we see our mind as one self. But the reality we have discovered through neuroscience and psychology is that the mind looks more like this. It's like a bunch of modules that form a sort of committee of the mind. These modules can work independently, and sometimes they can even work against one another. 2 of these modules are working all of the time. They're called controlled processes and automatic processes, otherwise known as the Dragon and the Rider. Small note here. In his book, The Happiness Hypothesis, which is where this idea comes from, Jonathan Haidt calls these the elephant and the rider. But everything else about the illustrations is exactly the same. We are just going to refer to the elephant as the dragon. I mean, how can we not? Just look at that stupid face. Now, in the mind, we can often think of ourselves as just the controlled processes, or the rider. This is because the controlled processes are in charge of controlled thought, like language and logic. It's easy to take for granted, but the dragon controls everything else. The elephant, or dragon, includes the gut feelings, visceral reactions, emotions, and intuitions that comprise much of the automatic system. Anxiety, by the way, falls squarely into this camp. But since we think in languages, i.e. the inner monologue, we begin to see ourselves as purely the rider. So much so that it may be difficult for us to understand how the dragon and the rider might disagree. There are 3 important components of disagreement between the rider and the dragon, and they can help us better understand anxiety as well as the other attributes of our mind. The first is that the dragon is large and the rider is small. A rider cannot overpower a dragon with strength, or in the mind, pure willpower. Though the rider may want to, it cannot just force the dragon to do what it wants. This is why it's all too easy to commit to goals, like dieting for instance, 1 second, and then turn around and eat candy the next. The rider wants one thing, and the dragon wants another. The second of the 3 components is called the game. If you know what the game is, you just lost. Sorry. If you don't know what the game is, it's a mental game that we are all playing all of the time. And it's something that's often discussed on playgrounds. There's only one rule to the game. If you think about the game, you lose. And now that you know about the game, you are destined to lose it again. Because the only way to never lose the game is to not know it exists. And now you can never not know it exists again. So, I'm genuinely sorry about that. The game is actually difficult, and somewhat of a phenomenon, because of the way the mind works. The dragon is great at doing progress checks to help the rider navigate the journey, but those progress checks only work when they're outwardly facing, like remembering your keys when you leave the house.
Here's me planting an idea in your head. I say to you, don't think about elephants. What are you thinking about?
Elephants.
When the dragon starts doing progress checks on something mental, it gets you caught in a sort of self-defeating loop.
Dude, what does mine say? Sweet! What about mine? Dude, what does mine say? Sweet! What about mine?
Thus, the attempt to remove an unpleasant thought can guarantee it a place on your frequent playlist of mental ruminations.
What about mine? Dude, what does mine say? Sweet!
The third and final component is that the dragon makes the judgments. It is the elephant, or the dragon, who decides what is good or bad, beautiful or ugly. Gut feelings, intuitions, and snap judgments happen constantly and automatically. It's because of this that we know that the dragon thinks intuitively, and leaves the rider, who is in charge of logic and language, to invent explanations for why it has decided what it likes or dislikes. Haidt references several studies that found that people confabulate explanations for gut judgments that they then later struggle to justify when logically probed about them. It is important to remember that the rider is very new, evolutionarily speaking. Language was developed relatively recently in human history, and automatic processes have been around forever, which is why it sometimes seems like the dragon is really the one holding the reins. Now don't worry, that isn't all to say that this dragon rider situation is a totally broken system. It's not. It actually works beautifully in a lot of cases, and is the explanation for much of human brilliance. When the rider and the dragon are in sync, that's when you can really fly. So how do you ensure that the rider and the dragon stay in sync? Well, the trick is to use the rider to train, or retrain, the dragon. The dragon is capable of taking in new information, making changes, and getting used to new ways of flying. This was how it learned to fly in the first place. So in the following episodes in this series, we'll cover a few different methods that you can use to retrain the dragon. But before we rush off and try to overhaul the dragon, it's important to take a second and recognize something first. The dragon is only trying to protect you, and fly you to safety. Which is why I think a good place to start is by loving and accepting the dragon for what it is. We should try to understand that the dragon is the way that it is largely because of what it has learned over time. So first, be kind to your dragon, or put another way, be kind to yourself. And remember that anxiety is not the enemy. We shouldn't beat up on ourselves because we feel anxious, and give ourselves yet another thing to feel anxious about. We should remember that anxiety is our dragon doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It just might need a nudge in a little bit of a different direction. And once we start to listen to our dragon, and set it up for success, who knows how far we can go. I just love this movie. It has so many good concepts. Really, if you haven't seen it, just stop what you're doing. Stop this, stop watching this. Go watch the movie. If you're still with me though, thanks so much for watching. You can find the links to the other 3 videos in this series in the description, or I'll put it up in the corner above. And short shameless plug, if you aren't already, consider subscribing and leaving a like if you liked it, leave a dislike if you didn't. But the algorithm will show the content to more people or not, depending on whether you do that. So if you found the concepts here helpful, help it reach more people, give it a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it means a lot to me. I just want to get the concepts that have helped me so much out there to more people, and you guys are really helping me do that. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.